Britain has left the European Union 3 years and 7 months after Britons voted in a referendum to leave. The moment has officially happened. At 11 p.m. London time on Friday night, the UK exited the bloc. It's the first country to ever do so. On Wednesday, the European Parliament gave its final approval. The chamber then broke out into a rendition of Auld Lang Syne, a song of farewell. The process has exposed deep divides in the country. Prime Minister Boris Johnson now says his job will be to bring the country together. To break it all down, Kounalakis joins us now. He's a foreign affairs syndicated columnist at McClatchy and a Hoover Institute fellow. Marcos, welcome. So the moment many Britons anticipated and some hoped would never happen has happened. Can you explain the scenario at hand?
Sure, Tanya. What's happened is that, in fact, what Boris Johnson promised, which was getting Brexit done, is now finally arrived. He got elected on this. He got an overwhelming number of parliamentary votes. And what we're now seeing is that it's not just getting Brexit done. The first process, the first piece of the process is done. What's happening right now is that Brexit is just getting started. This is where the negotiation starts in terms of how are they going to deal with the European Union. But at home, in Britain, you're right. The country is still split. Half of the country really didn't want this to happen. The Remainers, those who were for the Leave campaign, not necessarily those living in London, are still fairly happy because finally they've achieved this thing that's taken so long.
Wow. So, like you said, though, this is just the beginning. Britain now enters an 11-month transition period. How are they going to, slowly but surely separate themselves? Is this a financial process? Is this a cultural process? Is this sort of all of the above?
Well, I think first Britain has to get used to Megxit, where Meghan Markle and the husband formerly known as Prince have to leave the country and move to Canada. But once they get over that particular hurdle, then I think they're really going to have to sit down and figure this out. And it's the hard work, right? It's the negotiating process where Britain is going to want as many benefits as it's had with the European Union: open trade, free and easy access to the markets, all those things that would benefit the UK. At the same time, the European Union says, well, look, you've now left. You don't get to all those benefits. We have to figure it out. And so there will be friction, as Boris Johnson has warned his population. It's just not clear where that friction will arrive. But I can tell you one thing. Today is sort of the one day where none of this matters because they get all the benefits and they get to either celebrate or cry in their beer tonight, depending on where you were on that side of the equation.
Well, it's interesting because Secretary Pompeo has sought to reassure Britain of, its relationship with the U.S., but that is a relationship that will now have to enter into separate trade talks. And I'm sure that each side is not going to get exactly what they want. So will this relationship end up frayed?
It's a good question, Tanya, because we often hear about the special relationship between the United Kingdom and the United States, and it's something that we rely on for intelligence, for defense matters. And so the question then becomes, how do we express that special relationship in trade ties? Now, we know politically that Boris Johnson and Donald Trump are really birds of a feather. They're both sort of populists who really play to the gallery quite well. So we know that there's at least the ability for them to hold a conversation and sort of talk the same language. But again, the nitty-gritty, the promise has been from the United States that they're going to get a better deal than they had with the European Union. We'll see. I'm not so sure.
So, I think, Marcos, a lot of people aren't so clear, at least on this side of the pond, the difference between Great Britain, the UK, the British Isles. It's all very complicated. And now the trade for all of those countries has to be worked out, even though trade isn't Prime Minister Boris Johnson's only concern for a post-Brexit Britain. You've got Scotland's parliament voting Wednesday to hold a new referendum on Scottish independence. The Irish are weighing in. So what will this look like for a so-called United Kingdom?
Yeah, I mean, again, Tanya, that's a great question. And of course, we don't have the answers to this. But I can tell you, the way it looks today is that when Brexit occurred, Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave a speech about unity. It wasn't accidental that he was talking about unity. His job now as the Prime Minister of the UK is to try and keep it together at home now that he's separated from Europe. So, and you pointed out, Scotland is interested in holding a referendum to create an independent state. Ireland, the question of whether or not they are suddenly no longer bound, because remember, Ireland is still in the European Union, except for the northern part of Ireland, which they've worked out. But nonetheless, there's still issues of trade, of immigration, free flow of capital, free flow of individuals, and the pressures are great to actually separate within that country because suddenly those holds are no longer barred.
Mm-hmm. And aren't there growing calls for a united Ireland?
Yes. I mean, there are always these aspects that are within a nation that are separatist, right? I mean, it's true in the United States as well, whether it's Texas or Northern California. So just imagine some of those questions of sovereignty that are ever so present within our own nation, within the UK, are finding currency in this moment where suddenly you're allowed to question whether or not belonging to a union or a federal state or a union like the European Union is in question. In fact, they've just shown that there is no such thing as permanence. So it's going to be really up to Boris Johnson to make the rhetorical argument, and in many cases he will have to use the parliamentary strength and the power of London to keep it together within the UK.
No doubt Boris Johnson will have a lot on his plate in the months ahead. Markos Kounalakis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.